and they're trying to make sense of it, that they start to think about, well, what is this I'm experiencing and where is it coming from and can I do something about it? So yes, it's often the starting point. And that's why the Buddha taught it first. He said, this is your condition. Please understand the situation you find yourself in and understand there's a cause of it and there's something you can do about it. Okay. Yeah.
You said that in number 5 there is no difference between actions that are beneficial and actions that are harming. They
No
are both
difference.
dukkha.
I didn't say that. I said that there are include harmful behaviour and beneficial behaviour and also neutral behaviour.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that they all, because they're motivated, they all have a consequence, they have a result.
But they are all in the name of dukkha?
Yeah, so even our pleasant action, even our virtuous behaviour results in pleasant experiences, which is still dukkha. Because those pleasant experiences that are a result of our virtuous behaviours, they still finish. They're temporary, transient. So they're still dukkha. Of course, they're not any manifest suffering. Yeah.
After we eliminate dukkha, what will remain?
Happiness. What's called genuine happiness. And genuine happiness, now of course, we tend to identify happiness with pleasure. You know, we have some pleasurable experience, oh, I'm happy now. But this is a stimulus-based happiness. It's okay, but it's transient, temporary. What we call genuine happiness is not stimulus-based happiness. Meaning we don't need any particular stimulus to be in the state of happiness. And it's a state of inner well-being, and it's a state of well-being that comes from eliminating all of the mental afflictions in our mind, to basically purify our mind of all these ignorance and mental afflictions. Once we've got rid of those, then we can be in that state, regardless of what's going on around us. So that's what we're talking about as the goal, is to be in that state, which is beyond then mental afflictions and suffering. And if we're in that state, of course, that's the state where we can most effectively help others.
Would you say that the fraud happiness...
The what, sorry?
The fake happiness.
Fake happiness.
Which is pleasant.
Well, I wouldn't use the word fake.
Okay.
I would say that
temporary happiness.
Temporary happiness, yeah, okay.
The roots of this happiness are outside us, and the real happiness, the origin of the real happiness is inside me.
But even that's sort of okay, but remember that even pleasure can be from something inside. You know, if we remember something pleasant in the past, we can have a pleasant experience. So the stimulus doesn't have to be necessarily outside. The stimulus can be from within our own. Like we sit there and we remember something, some pleasant thing in the past, then we have a pleasant experience now from that memory. That memory is not an external stimulus, but it's still a stimulus. So the stimulus can come from outside or inside. But yes, that's true. Okay. Oh, sorry.
You mentioned before traumatic experience.
Mentioned what, sorry?
Traumatic.
Oh, traumatic, yeah.
What would be a traumatic experience then?
Well, any sort of suffering experience that causes us to question our life. It can be anything. I mean, it can be even a migraine headache. I mean, it can be anything. So any sort of unpleasant experience can be a catalyst for change.
I wanted to, what I'm observing is like, if one is in mental suffering or whatever, caused by comes again?
No, not necessarily. I mean, it's not the question of whether we're having pleasant or unpleasant experiences. The question is how we're relating to them. That's the big issue here. Because what we've seen here is what we do with pleasant experiences. We say, oh, I want those. I want more of those. Give me, give me. Unpleasant, oh, no, I don't want that. Go away, go away. This attachment and aversion is the thing that we're trying to overcome. To have a healthy understanding of these experiences and then use those experiences to move forward, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant.
Maybe you could help me with an example. Let's follow this example. For instance, one suffers from headaches, and then flowers makes relief, and I don't know, drums or I don't know, cars makes it worse.
Headache, yeah.
What would be the right approach?
Right. The right approach, or the beginning approach, would be to not have aversion. Meaning, usually if we have some headache or something suffering, physical or mental, we instantly go, problem. I don't want this. Please go away. And then we go, oh, go away, go away. Actually, if we have strong aversion, that magnifies our suffering. Magnifies. If we have very strong aversion, in fact, most of our suffering can be from the aversion. So often the case is, a lot of the suffering we experience because of strong aversion is self-induced, above what's there. So if we have a headache, then we can go, okay, I've got a headache. And then we can follow this very simple advice from a great Indian master, Shantideva, 8th century. He said, if a situation can be remedied, why get upset? Just fix it. So if you've got a headache and taking medication will relieve it, take the medication. No need to get upset. So that's the first part of his advice. And he says, and if a situation cannot be remedied, what's the point in getting upset? Meaning, if you've got a migraine headache and you know from your own experience medication doesn't fix it, you just have to wait a certain time, what's the point in getting upset? It won't help. All that it will do is will increase your suffering. So the first step is this, is to not develop aversion. If you can fix it, fix it. If you can't, okay, it'll pass. And so that is to stop the aversion. So that is the first step.
Though in traumatic experiences, it doesn't always go away.
No. But again, what we're going to find is that a lot of the time, a lot of the suffering is self-induced above what's there. So at least we can stop that. You know, and then we can also work at a deeper level, but we're going to talk about that a little bit tomorrow. So the first step is, please don't induce a lot of extra suffering on what's already there. That we can start with as a starting point. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is to have a look at how we establish the correct view of reality. And for this, we're going to look at another one of your handouts, the 3 vehicles. So the 3 vehicles are levels of practice, levels of overcoming these distortions. So we have the first vehicle here is called Tera Vaada. And in this level, and this is coming from the the first teachings that the Buddha gave on the Four Noble Truths. That we're stuck, in this state of dukkha. We're stuck here because of our mental afflictions. And if we eliminate our mental afflictions, and particularly this distortion, this ignorance, we can overcome all of our mental afflictions and suffering and be liberated from this state of dukkha altogether. And so these teachings are the core of what's now the modern day Tera Vaada traditions within Buddhism. So here we're talking about Sri Lankan Buddhism, Burmese, Thai, Laos, Cambodia, through Southeast Asia. In all of these Buddhist traditions, they have the goal, we see in the chart here, is the goal of Nirvana. The goal of Nirvana is this goal of being liberated from this cycle that we're stuck in, this unsatisfactory state of dukkha. And, of course, we need to develop an aspiration to break free of the cycle. So that's why we need to first understand the cycle. We need to first understand the state we're in, this idea of dukkha, this unsatisfactory state of dukkha, and to understand that it's coming based on reflecting on what we looked at previously, the previous chart, to understand that this is coming from our mental afflictions and fundamental ignorance, and that if we eliminate these mental afflictions and ignorance, we can break free of that cycle, we can achieve a state of what's called genuine happiness, and that state here is called Nirvana. So Nirvana is this state of being liberated from suffering by eliminating the mental afflictions and ignorance in our mind. So this is a state of inner well-being, genuine happiness, a state of happiness that does not require any particular stimulus. So we need to develop the aspiration for that goal by reflecting on the things that we've just reflected on in the previous chart, and then we can develop an aspiration to break free. Again, this is another example of how often the translation creates confusion, because here the word is renunciation in English that's often used. But actually the original Sanskrit word nisarana you see in brackets, nisarana literally means to emerge from, to come out of. So it's the wish to come out of this cycle that we find ourselves in this state of dukkha. Whereas the early translators sort of translated this as renunciation, which is not very accurate. And also when people see this, then often we get a sort of wrong idea. Because renunciation, of course, means to give up. And then often people, and this is the entry point into the Buddhist spiritual path. So, often you hear, to become Buddhist, to enter the Buddhist spiritual path, you need to have renunciation. And then people think, I don't want to become a Buddhist. That means I have to give up my BMW and my money and my eating at nice restaurants. I think I want to do that. This is not renunciation. Renunciation, as we just on the previous question we looked at, is renunciation is giving up, but it's not giving up these things. Again, as we mentioned in the previous question, it's about giving up an unhealthy attitude towards these things. It's basically to give up attachment to pleasant things, aversion to unpleasant things, because this is unhealthy. It doesn't bring us anything except more suffering. So if we can give up that by understanding the source of happiness and suffering is not out there, it's in here, then we can have this aspiration for liberation, for nirvana. And then we see here the practices. What practices do we need to engage in if we want to achieve this goal of nirvana? And here, we see the most common presentation here is what's called the Noble Eightfold Path. And these 8 practices can be condensed into those 3 core areas of practice here we see. The 3 higher trainings: ethics, concentration, wisdom. So if we want to achieve this state, then the basis is ethics, ethical lifestyle. Give up harmful behaviour. On that basis, to practice concentration. And here concentration is to develop single point of concentration. Because in our Vipassana practice, we want to be able to not just have an intellectual understanding of reality, we want to be able to directly experience this in meditation. To do that, we need a very calm, clear and focused mind. We need concentration. So sometimes this concentration practice is called shamatha practice, because shamatha is the Sanskrit word that talks about the level of concentration we're trying to develop in the spiritual path. So on the basis of developing a calm, clear, focused mind, then we can engage in the wisdom practice. And wisdom here, this wisdom practice, often we, instead of using the word wisdom or Sanskrit prajna, we use the word vipassana or vipassana. So vipassana is the wisdom practice, the wisdom coming to realize the nature of reality. Now, here in the Tera Vaada traditions, we see what does it mean then, this vipassana or vipassana practice. So here we see that there are 3 insights we are cultivating. They are called the 3 marks of existence. And these 3 insights we are cultivating here are overcoming those first 3 distortions that I mentioned. The first way in which we distort reality is we see things as rather stable. So the insight we are to realize or develop there is impermanence. Is to come to realize that things are changing moment by moment. Again, now, intellectually, we probably all accept that. But is our intellectual understanding of impermanence, is that helping us in our daily life? Not really. Because instinctively, we're not seeing things like that. In our behaviour is not really driven by our intellectual understanding. Our behaviour is driven by our instinctive habits. And now our instinctive habit is telling us that things around us are quite stable and not really changing much. And we interact with things in this way. And this is out of sync. So here in Vipassana practice, the first thing we are doing is we are bringing our intellectual understanding of impermanence into experience through meditation. We are meditating to come to realize things are changing moment by moment, directly, in direct experience, in meditation. And if we can realize impermanence directly in meditation, this has a profound impact on our mind. So much so that when we come out of the meditation, that experience is still affecting our mind, which means in our daily life, now we're going to start to see things experientially as flowing. And then we will relate to things in that way in our behaviour. And so we're going to be more in harmony, more in sync with reality. So what you will find is that if we can bring this intellectual understanding of impermanence that I think we all have now already, it's not something we really need to philosophize and think about a lot to come to understand. If we can bring this into experience through meditation, then already our lives would dramatically improve. Because if we can now start through the meditation, the Vipasana practice of realizing impermanence, then what you will find is that in daily life, your attachment to pleasant things, your aversion to unpleasant things will dramatically reduce. Because attachment can only really work if it's got something to grab hold of. And if we're seeing everything as flowing and changing, there's nothing for attachment to grab. Likewise, there's nothing for aversion to push against. So you'll find that your attachments and aversions will dramatically decrease through this Vipassana practice, realizing impermanence. And so this is the first meditation that we're going to do now, right after the break. But just to mention a couple more things here, then we'll take a morning tea break, and then we'll go into the Vipassana practice looking at this. So the other two things we're in Vipassana practice here is to realize this suffering or dukkha. So again here, to reflect on this and to really come to directly see that we're stuck in this unsatisfactory state of dukkha. And if we can really realize that in meditation, that will have a profound impact on our mind, because then we're going to understand that the source of happiness and suffering is not out there, it's in here. And then from this realization, this aspiration for Nirvana will grow. So through doing this Vipassana practice, we're really going to start to shift our focus from looking out there to looking in here, and start to really develop the aspiration to strive for this goal by working with our own mind. So this is really going to strengthen this aspiration. But then, of course, how do we actually achieve this goal of Nirvana? We need the third insight here. It says, know self. So again here, in the Tera Vaada traditions, the fundamental ignorance that we're suffering from is this grasping onto autonomous self. That instinctively we have a sense that there's a me here somewhere, and this me that's here is something more than the body and the mind. There's a third thing, something extra, something that sort of is self-existent, autonomous, doesn't seem to rely on anything else to exist. Again, intellectually, we may be able to appreciate, well, there's a body and a mind here, and there's nothing more than that. But experientially, that's not how we see ourselves. Experientially, instinctively, we instinctively have a sense that somewhere here is a me. And this me is definitely something more than just the body and the mind. Because we have this in our language. I have a body. I have a mind. As if there's a third thing, this me here, that has a body and has a mind. And this me is something more than the body and the mind, and is very autonomous, is self-existent. That's how we instinctively see ourselves. According to Buddhism, this is a false sense of me. This is this grasping onto autonomous self. If we can come to realize in meditation there's no such autonomous self, then according to the Theravada traditions, this is the fundamental ignorance that is the root of all of our mental afflictions and suffering. So if we can come to realize no self, no autonomous self, we can achieve the goal of Nirvana. We can overcome all of our mental afflictions and suffering. Of course, here we're not saying there's no me. There is no Buddhist tradition that says there's no me and no person. Of course there's a me and a person, just like there's a laptop and flowers. The question with all of this is not whether or not there's a me and a flowers and a laptop. The question is, how do all of these things exist? Now we have a false view of how things exist. We instinctively feel things are quite stable. We instinctively feel that things actually are in nature of happiness, and we instinctively feel there's this autonomous self here. This is all false in the Tera Vaada. So if we can come to realize these three insights, particularly the last one here, then we can achieve the goal of Nirvana. We can overcome all of our mental afflictions and suffering. So this, whenever you go then to a Tera Vaada Buddhist country, Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Southeast Asia in general, and they talk about Vipasana practice, they're talking about these three insights. To cultivate these three insights. So this is what Vipasana practice encompasses in all of these Buddhist traditions. Any questions about this before we break for morning tea? Yeah.
If the two wings of the Buddhism is compassion and wisdom,
Yeah.
is there any talk about compassion in Tera Vaada?
Yes. Of course, when we look at the three higher trainings, ethics, concentration, wisdom, ethics, of course, there's a lot of overlap there with compassion. And also in the, as a separate thing to the Eightfold Path, then we talk about, at that level of practice, we talk about what's called the four immeasurables. In the Tera Vaada traditions, they're often called the four Brahma Viharas: loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. So also here, we're talking about these aspects of practice as well, of course.
When we said all these practices are Vipasana practices,
Yeah.
when does a meditation is a Vipasana? Like if I meditate on suffering, when is it is a practice of Vipasana, and what is the definition of Vipasana?
Well, Vipassana again means insight. It means we are doing a meditation, what's often called analytical meditation, one where we investigate. And the goal of that meditation is to come to a new insight, a new, a correct understanding of something. Then it's Vipassana. So Vipassana is insight. We can also do this sort of investigative analytical meditation, and the goal can be to generate a certain positive attitude, like loving kindness and compassion. We may investigate suffering of ourselves and others, and the result of that meditation is that compassion comes forth. So that is an analytical meditation, but it wouldn't be a Vipassana practice, because it's to generate positive attitudes, whereas this is to gain insight into reality. So any practice that the result is gaining insight into some aspect of reality is a Vipassana practice.
Talking about the no self, there is the insight is that there is some common being that I'm part of, or there is no being at all.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at this, what it really means in more detail in the next session.
Okay.
And we can, this idea of no self, we can also understand it at a number of levels. This idea here of no self, no autonomous self, no autonomous me, and what we're going to focus on a little bit later, the idea of no independent, inherently existent me. They're a little bit different in levels of subtlety, but the bottom line with both of those is that the me that does exist is a dependent me, and what we mean by dependent me we're going to look at in detail probably tomorrow morning, I think, that's coming.
Regarding the self, I wonder, because we these days think that self is invention of the language. And I wonder where is the language is missing. For me, it's missing in all this conversation. Because all this analytical understanding is based on the assumption that there is a reality, even Buddhism accepts, only says that as we understand reality, we are mistaken. But there is another reality that the Buddhism understanding thinks this is reality. But I feel that somebody is here, he's in the room, but he's not here. He's the language.
Right. And we're going to look at this when we look about the dependency in detail later today or tomorrow morning, and we'll see how language and conception plays a role in this. And we're also going to see that at the deepest level, that to realize the nature of reality, we can only do that through direct experience, beyond language, beyond conceptuality. But
okay, I'll wait.
It's going to come. It'll come. And then if you don't get understanding, then ask questions there, because I have to talk about a lot of things. That's the short answer for now. Okay. Let's stop there, have a morning tea break, and we'll come back in about 20 minutes or so.